Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, not just a few centuries, but over 1,000 years, to a place where beauty standards were, well, let's just say they'd make your modern dentist a little nervous. We're journeying to ancient Japan to uncover a forgotten aesthetic, a practice that for centuries was the very definition of elegance, maturity, and high status. It's a story that challenges everything we think we know about a beautiful smile. And frankly, if you were dropped into this world, you'd probably be considered a bit of a wild-looking barbarian for having pearly whites. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support means the world. While you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. You're standing silently, hidden in the shadows of a meticulously sculpted pine tree. Before you lies a sprawling aristocratic mansion, not a fortress of stone, but a delicate labyrinth of dark, polished wooden translucent paper screens. This is Heian, the capital of Japan. Sometime around the 10th century, the moon is a perfect, brilliant silver disk. Its light so bright it casts sharp shadows across the raked gravel of the courtyard. The only sounds are the rhythmic chirping of crickets and, somewhere in the distance, the faint, melancholic tucking of a biwa, a pear-shaped lute. You are an invisible observer, a ghost slipping through time, and your gaze is fixed on a single, illuminated paper screen. A soft, flickering light glows from within, turning the paper into a golden canvas upon which the silhouette of a person moves with impossible grace. The screen slides open with a soft, woody sigh. A figure emerges onto the veranda, stepping out into the moonlight. It's a woman. Your first impression is of stark contrasts. Her face is a perfect oval, coated in a thick, matte white powder called Oshiro eye, making it look like a porcelain mask. Her eyebrows have been completely removed, and in their place, to smudge GY. Thumb-ripped-like brows are painted high on her forehead, close to her hairline. It's a strange, doll-like appearance. Her hair is the most startling feature and impossibly long. Straight cascade of jet black silk that flows down her back, cooling on the wooden floorboards behind her. She is wearing a juni high toe, a ceremonial robe of 12 unlined layers, each a different shade of silk. The edges just visible at her collar and sleeves like a subtle, personal rainbow. She stands there for a moment, a living work of art, her expression serene and unreadable in the moonlight. She seems to be listening to the night, just as you are. Then, a slight smile touches her lips, and that's when you see it. Her teeth are not white. They are not yellowed, or stained, or decayed. They are black, a deep, glossy, uniform black, as if they were carved from a single piece of polished obsidian. The effect is profoundly jarring to your modern eyes. It's a black void in the center of that perfect, white painted face. There is no glint of enamel, no hint of ivory, just a lacquered darkness. Your mind struggles to process what it's seeing, but you must understand, you are not witnessing poor hygiene or some sort of affliction. You are witnessing the absolute height of beauty and sophistication. This is Ohaguro, the ancient Japanese custom of dyeing one's teeth black. In the dim, flickering world of lantern light and moonbeams that she inhabits, a flash of white teeth could be seen as jarring, almost feral. It broke the carefully constructed artifice of the face. Some historians even argue that it reminded people of an animal bearing its fangs. The black teeth, however, did the opposite. They made the mouth recede into a gentle shadow, rendering the smile subtle and enigmatic. It was the final, perfect touch on the canvas of the face, a mark of civilization that distinguished the refined courtier from the untamed world outside the palace walls. It signaled that she was a woman of high birth, a woman of taste, and almost certainly, a married woman who had come of age. The precise origin of this practice is one of those things scholars still love to debate over. Some believe it was imported from cultures in Southeast Asia or the Asian mainland, while others argue it may have developed indigenously for a completely different reason, perhaps as a primitive form of dental sealant, and only later became a mark of beauty for the woman standing before you. However, there is no debate. It is simply what is beautiful. It is what is right. She turns her head slightly, her long hair rustling like dry leaves, and the smile vanishes. Her expression returns to one of placid neutrality. Without another sound, she glides back through the opening and slides the paper screen shut, leaving you alone once more in the moonlit garden. The image of her beautiful, black-toothed smile burned forever into your memory. The paper screen remains closed, a silent, glowing rectangle in the vast darkness of the estate. You stay perfectly still, letting the image of that black-toothed smile settle in your mind. It's a puzzle. Why go to such lengths? Why create such a stark, almost startling contrast to your 21st century brain, trained on advertisements for whitening toothpaste and brilliant Hollywood smiles? It feels like a deliberate act of disfigurement. But to understand it, you have to completely abandon your own definition of beauty and step into theirs. You have to adjust your eyes to the dim light of the Heian period. Let's start with the canvas itself, their perfect, white face. This wasn't just a light dusting of powder. The application of Ohaguro, the face whitening powder, was an artful. Imagine waking up in the morning, not to wash your face and apply a bit of moisturizer, but to create a mask. The ideal was a flawless, opaque white that completely obscured the natural skin tone, its blemishes, its emotions. For the aristocrats of this era, the natural face was considered unrefined, too raw. The powdered face was a symbol of leisure, a sign that you didn't toil in the sun-drenched rice paddies. This powder itself has a curious history. The most basic versions were made from rice flour, but the truly prized high-end Ohaguro that gave the smoothest, most luminous finish was made from a not-so-secret ingredient, white lead. Yes, lead. The same heavy metal we now know as a potent neurotoxin. For centuries, the elite women of Japan would painstakingly mix this lead powder with water to form a paste, applying it to their face, neck, and chest. It was a daily ritual that, while achieving the desired aesthetic, was slowly and silently poisoning them. A classic case of suffering for beauty, taken to a chemical level. Now, picture this lead white face in its intended environment. You aren't in a brightly lit office or a sun-filled park. You are inside a sprawling wooden palace, where the rooms are vast, the eaves are deep, and the only light sources are the faint daylight filtering through paper screens or, at night, the gentle, flickering flame of a single oil lamp or a wax candle. In this world of perpetual twilight, a natural face would be lost in the shadows. But a face painted stark white, it would seem to float in the gloom. A serene, glowing mask that holds the viewer's attention. Historians still debate the primary motivation for this look. Was it purely an aesthetic choice, an imitation of the fashionable court ladies of Tang Dynasty China, or was it a deeply practical one, designed to make one's features visible and expressive in the deep, romantic darkness of their homes? This is where the black teeth suddenly start to make a strange kind of sense. Imagine that glowing white face in the candlelight. The woman smiles. If her teeth were white, what would you see in the flickering light? The contrast would be gone. You'd see a dark slash of a mouth, and inside it, a jumble of pale, bony-looking shapes. It would be visually chaotic. It could look aggressive, almost skull-like. A flash of white teeth breaks the serene, otherworldly illusion of the mask. It's too real, too animalistic. Ohaguro was the elegant solution to this aesthetic problem. By dyeing the teeth a uniform, glossy black, the meld, even when open, becomes a soft, empty shutter. It doesn't compete with the white face. It complements it. The smile is no longer about a flash of enamel, it's about the gentle upward curve of the lips against the pale skin. The teeth themselves disappear, receding into a graceful void. It transforms the mouth from a potentially jarring feature into a subtle, mysterious punctuation mark on the face. The entire focus of the expression shifts upwards, to the eyes, the only part of the face that still held a natural, unpainted liveliness. So you see, the goal wasn't to have black teeth. The goal was to not have white teeth. It was an act of aesthetics attraction, by removing the visual distraction of white teeth. The carefully constructed harmony of the face, the white skin, the high smudged brows, the impossibly long hair was complete. It was a look that screamed control, refinement, and a deep understanding of the interplay between light and shadow. The black-toothed smile wasn't a flaw in the masterpiece, it was the final, deliberate brushstroke that perfected it. You're beginning to see it now. Aren't you? It's not about what's there, but about what's gracefully absent. As you linger in the shadows of the garden, the initial shock begins to fade, replaced by a dawning understanding. That black-toothed smile wasn't just an aesthetic choice made in a vacuum, it was a powerful social signal. A silent declaration broadcast to everyone she met, to the people of Heian, Japan, and for many centuries that followed. A mouthful of blackened teeth was not a sign of decay or poor hygiene. It was the absolute opposite. It was a symbol of civilization. Let's unpack that idea. In an era where life was often short and brutal, the line between the civilized world of the court and the wild world of nature and the uneducated masses was a line that the aristocracy desperately wanted to draw and maintain. Anything that hinted at our more primal, animalistic nature was something to be tamed, covered, or altered. Think about it, animals have white teeth. They use them to tear, to rip, to defend. A flash of white teeth, as we touched on, could be seen as a flash of the beast within. By deliberately painstakingly blackening their teeth, the nobility were making a statement: I am not an animal. I am a human being who has transcended my base nature. It was a form of body modification that permanently marked them as separate from the untamed world. While peasants might have teeth stained by their diet or yellowed by age, this uniform, lacquered black, was intentional. It was culture, not nature. It was a triumph of human will over biology. This is especially true when it comes to maturity. The practice of Ohaguro was deeply tied to the rite of passage into adulthood. A young girl in the Heian court would have her natural teeth, but upon reaching a certain age, typically in her mid-teens, around the time of her jinpuku, or coming-of-age ceremony, she would undergo her first teeth blackening. It was a physical manifestation of her transition. One day, she was a child with a child's mouth. The next, she was an adult. Her smile forever changed to reflect her new status. More than just adulthood, it almost always signified marriage. For a woman, blackening her teeth was a declaration that she was taken, that she was a wife and a cornerstone of a family. It was a sign of sexual maturity and availability, or rather, the end of her availability on the open market. It was a promise of fidelity, a permanent mark of her commitment. An unmarried woman, even one of noble birth, would typically not adopt the practice until her wedding was arranged. So when you saw a woman with Ohaguro, you weren't just seeing a pretty face, you were seeing a social resume. You knew her approximate age, her marital status, and her place in the social hierarchy, all from a single smile. There's a fascinating, and somewhat debated, linguistic link here. One theory, which many scholars find compelling, suggests that the term used for the practice in the imperial court, Fushimizo Ubeizashrei, had double meaning. On the surface, it referred to the gall-nut solution used in the dye, but phonetically, it sounds very similar to the word for husband or couple fofu. It's a bit of a historical pun. Whether this was intentional or a happy coincidence is something academics still argue about. But it beautifully illustrates the deep connection between the practice and the state of matrimony. And here's a quirky little detail for you. The custom was just about looking different from animals. It was also about hiding your emotions. In the highly ritualized and stoic world of the Japanese court, openly displaying your feelings was considered unsophisticated. They wide. Toothy grin was seen as vulgar and uncontrolled. The black teeth helped to create a more demure, reserved expression. The smile became a subtle gesture, a slight curve of the lips, rather than an uninhibited explosion of joy. It was all part of the performance of ideal courtly behavior, serene, calm, and perpetually composed. So as you think back to the woman on the veranda, you realize her smile was a complex tapestry of meaning. It wasn't just pretty. It was a proclamation of her identity. It said, I am a noble. I am an adult. I am a wife. I am civilized. I am in control of my emotions. And I am beautiful. By the only standards that matter in this world. The darkness in her mouth wasn't an absence of light, it was full of meaning. The moon has climbed higher now, casting a sterile, silver light over the silent courtyard. The memory of that noble woman's smile lingers, but your perspective is shifting. You're no longer just an observer of the final product, you're starting to wonder about the process. How does one achieve such a perfect, inky black? It was something you were born with. It was something that was done, an event. Unlike any significant transformation, it was steeped in ritual. Let's leave the moonlit garden and drift through the paper walls of the mansion. We're going to find a younger girl, perhaps 14 or 15 years old. Her name might be something elegant and poetic, like Akiko, child of autumn, or Murasaki, lavender. For her, today is the most important day of her young life. It is the day of her Genpuku, her coming-of-age ceremony. Up until this morning, she was a girl. By sunset, she will be considered a woman. The day has been a whirlwind of ceremony. Her long, childhood hair has been intricately styled for the first time into an adult coiffure. She has put on her first set of layered robes, the magnificent Julie Haito, a heavy weight of silken status on her small shoulders. Her natural eyebrows, which she has had her whole life, have been carefully shaved off this very morning. The empty space feels strange and naked on her forehead. And now, the final, most daunting step awaits the first application of Ohaguro. You find her kneeling on a silk cushion in a quiet, private room. Her mother and perhaps a trusted older female attendant are with her. The air is thick with a strange, medicinal, and frankly unpleasant smell. It's the scent of the dye, which has been prepared for this very occasion. In front of her is a small, ornate lacquerware set bowl, a small pot, and a delicate brush. This isn't just a cosmetic application, it's a solemn rite. Akiko is nervous. She has seen her mother, her aunts, and all the other married women of the court with their black teeth her entire life. To her, it is the image of grace and maturity. But the stories of the first time are always a little intimidating. The taste, they say, is awful. The process, tedious. Her mother takes the small ceramic pot. Inside is a dark, viscous liquid. It's the legendary Ohaguro dye, the primary ingredient, which gives it that astringent, metallic smell, is a solution called cane miza, literally iron water. To make it, you deseal crusty scraps of iron-old nails, discarded bits of metal in a mixture of tea, vinegar, or sometimes even sake. This acidic liquid would be left to ferment for days, even weeks, until it became a dark, potent, iron acetate solution. It smells about as good as it sounds. But iron acetate alone won't create a lasting black. It needs a mordant, a chemical that helps the dye bind to the surface of the teeth. This is where the second ingredient comes in. The attendant opens a small wooden box and takes out a fine powder. This is frishy, or gallnut powder. Gallnuts are strange, tumor-like growths that form on sumac trees after they've been stung by an insect. They are incredibly rich in tannic acid. When this tannin-rich powder is mixed with the iron-rich cane miza, a chemical reaction occurs. The iron acetate reacts with the tannic acid, creating ferric and nater compound that is intensely blackened, crucially, water-insoluble. Now for a little known, and slightly gross detail of the recipe to make the dye thicker and help it adhere better. Some recipes called for adding a slurry of rice gruel. This starchy concoction would not only give the dye body but would also, as you can imagine, contribute to the already complex and challenging flavor profile. Whether this specific addition was common or a regional variation is one of those small details historians get to debate. The mother now demonstrates the technique. She mixes a small amount of the gallnut powder with the iron water in the lacquer bowl, creating a fresh batch of the inky dye. She dips the fine brush, made of soft animal hair, into the mixture. "Open your mouth, little one," she says, her voice gentle but firm. Akiko takes a deep breath and parts her lips. The brush, loaded with the cold, foul-tasting liquid, touches her teeth. She flinches at the taste bitter, sour, metallic, all at once. Her mother works quickly and methodically, painting each tooth, front and back, with the black lacquer. The goal is to get an even, opaque coat. It's like painting tiny, delicate, and very sensitive sculptures. Akiko sighs water, both from the fumes and the sheer unpleasantness of the sensation. She has to fight the instinct to spit it out. After the first coat is applied, she must sit perfectly still, her mouth slightly open, to let it dry. Then, another coat, and another. The process is repeated until her teeth have transformed from their natural ivory to a deep, glossy black. The ritual is complete. Her mother hands her a small, polished bronze mirror. Akiko peers at her reflection in the dim light. The face staring back is no longer her own. It is the face of a woman of the Heian court. The smudged brows are high on her forehead, her hair is swept up, and when she tentatively smiles, her teeth are gone, replaced by a sophisticated, dark gleam. A tear of pain, or maybe pride, traces a clean path through the white powder on her cheek. She has left her childhood behind, one foul-tasting bustling at a time. You pull your focus away from the quiet solemnity of the young woman's transformation and let your perspective drift. The grand Heian mansion, with its rustling silks and whispered poetry, is not the only place where this strange and powerful custom is practiced. The world of the courtier, was one of aesthetic refinement. But Japan had another elite class, one whose identity was forged not in art, but in steel, the samurai, the warrior nobility. And as you shift your attention to a rugged, fortified estate in the countryside, you discover that Ohaguro was not exclusively a female custom. Here, the air doesn't smell of jasmine and incense. It smells of horse, leather, and charcoal smoke. Instead of the gentle plucking of a biwa, you hear the distant, rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel from a swordsmith's forge. In the main hall of the keep, a group of samurai are gathered. They are not dressed in voluminous silks but in practical, dark-colored kimonos. Their faces are not powdered white, but are weathered by sun and wind. Yet, when one of them, a high-ranking warrior, turns to speak, he reveals the same lacquered, black-toothed smile. The sight is perhaps even more jarring here. In a woman, it complemented the artifice of her makeup. In a man known for his martial prowess, it seems like a profound contradiction. Why would a fearsome warrior adopt a custom so closely associated with female beauty and domesticity? The answer lies in the samurai's unique code of conduct and their relationship with death. For a samurai, loyalty was the highest virtue, specifically, loyalty to their lord, their daimyo. A samurai's life was not their own, it belonged to their master. To symbolize this unwavering devotion, many samurai, especially those of high rank, would blacken their teeth. It was a visual pledge. Just as a married woman's Ohaguro signaled she belonged to one husband, a samurai's Ohaguro signaled he belonged to one lord. It was a permanent mark of allegiance, a way of saying, I will not serve another. A samurai with blackened teeth was making a clear statement about his unwavering commitment. This practice became particularly widespread during periods of intense civil war, like the Sengoku period, The age of warring states. In an era of shifting alliances and betrayals, such a visible and semi-permanent sign of loyalty was incredibly valuable. It was a way to build trust. There was also a deeply practical, and rather grim, reason for the custom. A samurai lived every day with the possibility of dying in battle. A warrior's head was the ultimate trophy for an enemy. If a samurai was defeated, his head would be taken and presented to the victorious lord for inspection and reward. It was a matter of great honor to have your head be identifiable as that of a high-ranking warrior. This is where a very curious bit of pre-battle ritual comes in. Before heading into a fight, a samurai would not only perfume their helmet and arrange their hair neatly, but they would also ensure their Ohaguro was freshly applied. Why imagine a battlefield littered with the fallen? A soldier finds a severed head. He looks at the teeth. If they are white or yellow, this might be a common foot soldier, an Ohaguro. But if the teeth are carefully blackened, it signals that this was a man of status. A true samurai. The black teeth served as a post-mortem status symbol. It ensured that even in death, your rank would be recognized and you would not be mistaken for a commoner. It was about dying a good death and having your final moments treated with the appropriate respect, or at least having your head fetch a higher price for your killer. The exact moment this became common practice is debated by military historians, with some suggesting it was a later development, while others see its roots in earlier warrior culture. Furthermore, just like for the court ladies, blackening the teeth was a mark of maturity. A young boy training to be a samurai would have his genpuku ceremony. Just like the aristocratic girl, for him, it involved receiving his first real swords. His adult name Ibo's Heian no, and, for many, his first teeth blackening. It was a package deal of adulthood. One notable example is the famous warlord Takeda Shingen, whose portraits often depict him with the aristocratic powdered face, high mouth eyebrows, and blackened teeth, blurring the line between courtly refinement and military power. So when you look at that warrior's black-toothed smile, you are not seeing a contradiction. You are seeing a complex symbol perfectly suited to his world. It's a statement of loyalty, a preparation for an honorable death, and a mark of his coming of age. It was a way of bringing the same sense of discipline, control, and civilization that defined the court into the brutal, chaotic world of the battlefield. For the samurai, the black teeth were not a sign of femininity, but a silent oath, forged in iron and worn with pride. Let's retreat from the stark realities of the samurai's world and return to that quiet, private room where the young noblewoman, Otiko, is still acclimatizing to her new smile. You've seen the complex web of status, beauty, and civilization. You've seen the ritual, the solemn first application. But now, let's get uncomfortably close to the what. Let's lean in and really investigate the concoction being painted onto her teeth. Your modern sensibilities might want to recoil, because this isn't a pleasantly scented cosmetic from a clean, sterile lab. This is a medieval recipe, born of folk chemistry and, frankly, a strong stomach. Your attention focuses on the small lacquer bowl sitting on the floor. The contents are a deep, opaque black, with a slightly viscous texture. The smell is the first thing that hits you. It's not a single, easily identifiable scent. It's a layered assault on the senses. The most dominant note is a sharp, sour tang, like vinegar that's been left out for too long. Underlying that is a distinct, rusty, metallic smell. The smell of old iron. And mingling with both is a bitter, earthy aroma, like damp tree bark or overbrewed tea. This is the perfume of Ohaguro, and it's not for the faint of heart. Let's break down the kitchen where this would be made. It wasn't a pristine workshop. The process begins with the cane miza, the iron water. Imagine an old clay pot kept in a dark, cool corner of the kitchen or a storehouse. Into this pot go the iron scraps. We're not talking about purified iron filings. We're talking about anything they could find: old, bent nails pulled from a dismantled building, a broken piece of a farm tool, perhaps even shavings collected from a wordsmith's floor. These pieces are often heated first and then plunged into the acidic liquid to encourage oxidation. This liquid itself was a sour brew, while rice vinegar was common. A cheaper and readily available alternative was sake that had gone bad, turning into rice vinegar on its own. And then there's the tea. This wasn't a delicate green tea for sipping. It was often a coarse, low-grade tea, boiled down to a dark, bitter concentrate. The combination of acidic liquid and tannins from the tea would begin the process of dissolving the iron, creating the iron acetate solution. The pot would be left to sit, to ferment, to stew in its own pungent juices for weeks, even months. Every so often, more tea or vinegar would be added. It was a living, evolving brew, and the exact ripeness of the cane miso was a matter of household expertise, passed down from mother to daughter. Now for the second key component, the fushi, or gall-nut powder. If you were to see a gall-nut on a sumac tree, you might think it was a piece of fruit or a strange, woody mushroom. It's a hard, roundish growth, created by the tree's defensive reaction to the larvae of an insect that has burrowed into its bark. These gall-nuts were harvested, dried, and then ground into a very fine, brownish powder. This powder is almost pure tannic acid. If you've ever tasted something incredibly astringent, something that makes your whole mouth pucker and feel dry, that's the sensation of tannins. The magic happens at the moment of application. The iron water and the gall-nut powder are not typically mixed and stored together. The chemical reaction that creates the black color happens quickly, so the attendant would create a fresh batch for each use. They pour a small amount of the stinky iron liquid into a bowl and then, with a small scoop, add a precise amount of the bitter gall-nut powder. As they stir, the brownish liquid in the pale powder would swirl together and, within seconds, transform into a deep, true black. And here's a little known, and rather unpleasant, fact about the process. The chemical reaction was the key, but the taste was famously awful. To try and mask the flavor, or perhaps just to add their own secret ingredient, some families would add other things to the mix. Spices like cinnamon or cloves were sometimes included, but one of the most common additives, mentioned in some old texts, was a sweetener, not sugar, but a thick, sweet syrup made from boiling down the sap of the Japanese ivy. Can you imagine that flavor combinations are vinegar, rusty metal, bitter tannins, and a cloying, syrupy sweetness all at once? It's a testament to the commitment of these women that they endured this taste day after day. Whether the exact recipe involved sake, vinegar, tea, or a combination, and what specific spices or thickeners were used, is one of those granular details that varied from region to region and family to family. Historians studying old household records and literary descriptions are still piecing together the full spectrum of these recipes. But the core principle remained the same: the chemical marriage of iron and tannin. As you watch the brush being dipped into this freshly made dye, you have a new appreciation for the fortitude of the person on the receiving end. This wasn't a simple act of applying makeup. It was a small, daily act of enduring a truly foul-smelling and vile-tasting substance, all in the name of beauty, status, and tradition. The bowl of freshly mixed dye sits there, its inky blackness seeming to absorb the light in the room. You've smelled the recipe, you understand the chemistry, but now it's time to witness the sheer, painstaking artistry of the application. This isn't a quick swipe of lipstick. Maintaining a perfect set of black teeth was a daily, or near daily, chore. It was a personal, intimate ritual that required patience, a steady hand, and a high tolerance for discomfort. Think of it less as makeup and more as a form of miniature, high-maintenance soul lacquerware. Let's stay with our newly initiated noblewoman, Akiko. A few weeks after her coming-of-age ceremony, the novelty has worn off, and now the reality of the upkeep has set in. Each morning, or perhaps every other day, she must repeat a version of the ritual she first endured. The process begins not with application, but with preparation. She would first need to clean her teeth thoroughly. This wasn't done with a modern toothbrush and minty paste. The true love choice was a fusa yodai, a small twig, typically from the willow or hazelnut tree, one end of which was frayed or hammered until it resembled a soft, fibrous brush. She would use this to scrub her teeth, removing any food particles or plaque. The goal was to have a clean, smooth surface for the dye to adhere to. Any residue could lead to a patchy, uneven finish, which was considered highly undesirable. Once her teeth were clean and dry, the real work began. She would kneel before her personal lacquerware set, which held her pot of aged cane maize and her box of fushi powder. She would mix a small, fresh batch of the dye, just enough for one application. The consistency had to be just right, not too watery, or it wouldn't coat properly, and not too thick, or it would clump. Then she would pick up her specialized brush. It wasn't a large, clumsy instrument. It was often a very fine, delicate brush, perhaps with bristles made from deer or badger hair, attached to a thin bamboo handle, holding a small bronze mirror in one hand. She would begin the meticulous process of painting. Imagine the concentration required. She would have to pull back her lips, contorting her face into an awkward position, to ensure she could reach every visible surface of every tooth. She'd start with the front teeth, applying the dye in smooth, even strokes from the gum line to the tip. Then she'd have to work her way back to the molars, twisting the brush to reach the difficult angles. It was crucial to get the dye into the tiny crevices between teeth to avoid unsightly light-colored lines. The most skilled practitioners aimed for what was called the mirror finish. This wasn't just a matte black, it was a deep, glossy, reflective black, like polished jet. To achieve this, a secret ingredient was sometimes used, a pinch of fine powder made from grinding up the iridescent wings of a specific type of beetle, the tomamushi. This powder, when mixed into the final coat of dye, would impart a subtle, jewel-like shimmer. This wasn't common, and was likely a luxury reserved for the very wealthy. But it represents the peak of the Ohaguro art form. The existence and prevalence of this practice is one of those finer points that material culture historians love to investigate, often by analyzing the composition of dye traces on archaeological finds. After applying a full coat, she couldn't simply close her mouth and be done. She would have to sit for several minutes with her lips parted, allowing the dye to air dry. Breathing through her mouth, she'd have to endure the fumes, fighting the urge to swallow or let her tongue touch the wet, bitter dye. Once the first layer was tacky, she would apply another, and perhaps another after that. It was a process of building up thin, even layers, just as a master artisan would apply layers of lacquer to a fine wooden bowl. The whole process could take a significant amount of time, perhaps 15 to 30 minutes out of her morning, every single day, and it was a race against the clock. The dye was most potent right after it was mixed. As the chemical reactions settled, its staining power would diminish. This daily ritual was a woman's private burden, while the result was public. The process was done in seclusion. It was her personal commitment to maintaining the face she presented to the world. It was a testament to her discipline and her dedication to the ideals of beauty her culture held dear. Every perfect, back-toothed smile you saw was the result of thousands of such patient, repetitive, and deeply unpleasant moments. It was a quiet, daily act of self-creation, a constant renewal of the boundary between the Ross elf and the polished social persona. It makes you think twice about complaining about flossing, doesn't it? As you watch this painstaking, daily ritual unfold, a very modern, practical question starts to bubble up in your mind. All this effort, all this time, and a truly foul-tasting chemical bath for your teeth every single day. What was it actually doing to the teeth underneath? Our contemporary understanding of health screams that this has to be bad. Coating your teeth in a dark, acidic, metallic substance feels like a recipe for dental disaster. You'd expect rampant decay, gum disease, and all sorts of oral maladies. But here is where the story of Ohaguro takes a genuinely surprising turn. The practice, despite being motivated entirely by aesthetics and social signaling, had an incredible, and almost certainly accidental, health benefit. It was, In essence, one of history's most effective albeit unpleasant dental sealants. The women and men who practiced Ohaguro consistently had healthier teeth and fewer cavities than those who didn't. Let's break down how this unintentional piece of preventative medicine worked. The surface of your tooth enamel, while seeming smooth, is actually porous on a microscopic level. It's full of tiny tuberous and imperfections. This is where cavity-causing bacteria, like Streptococcus mutans, love to hang out. These bacteria feed on the sugars in your diet and produce acid as a waste product. This acid is what eats away at your tooth enamel, creating a weak spot that eventually becomes a cavity. Now, consider the Ohaguro dye. The two main components, iron acetate and tannic acid from gall nuts, were the key. When painted onto the teeth, this mixture didn't just sit on the surface. The liquid would seep into all those microscopic pores and cracks in the enamel. The chemical reaction that created the black, water-insoluble compound, thiorectinate, would happen inside these tiny crevices. It effectively shielded and sealed them with a hard, protective layer. It was like applying a coat of waterproof varnish to a piece of wood. This hardened layer did two things. First, it created a physical barrier. The sugar and bacteria in the mouth simply couldn't reach the actual surface of the enamel to begin their destructive work. The tooth was, for all intents and purposes, shrink-wrapped in a protective black film. Second, the components of the dye itself had antibacterial properties. Tannins, the very compounds that provide the astringent taste in tea and wine, are known to inhibit bacterial growth. The acidic nature of the canes of the iron vinegar solution would also have contributed to creating an environment hostile to many types of oral bacteria. So, not only was the tooth sealed, but the sealant itself was actively fighting the germs that cause decay. This isn't just a modern theory. Archaeological evidence strongly supports it. When forensic anthropologists and archaeologists examine skeletal remains from periods and social classes where Ohaguro was common, they consistently find skulls with beautifully preserved, cavity-free teeth, stained a deep black. In contrast, remains of individuals from the same period who did not practice Ohaguro often show significant evidence of dental caries, abscesses, and tooth loss. The difference can be remarkably stark. Here's a curious little side note that illustrates the point. In the later Edo period, there were popular romantic novels and plays. In these stories, a common trope to describe a character from the lower working class as someone who couldn't afford or wasn't part of the Ohaguro tradition was to mention their mushiba, their rotten or cavity-filled teeth. Good teeth were, ironically, black teeth. Of course, the people practicing it didn't know the precise science. They wouldn't have been able to tell you about Streptococcus mutans or the chemical structure of ferritinate, but they certainly observed the results. It's highly likely that mothers told their daughters, "This will keep your teeth strong," even if they didn't know exactly why. The belief that Ohaguro was good for dental health became part of the cultural knowledge surrounding the practice. The extent to which this health benefit was a conscious motivator versus a happy accident is, naturally, something historians discuss. The primary drivers were clearly beauty and status. But did the observable health benefits help to cement the tradition and ensure its longevity for over 1,000 years? It's very likely. It's a fascinating case of a culture stumbling upon an effective medical treatment for completely non-medical reasons. They came for the aesthetics, but they stayed for the enamel protection. It's a reminder that sometimes, history's most curious customs have hidden practical wisdom buried just beneath the surface. The realization that this seemingly bizarre cosmetic practice was also an effective dental treatment adds a new layer of complexity to the story. It was just a painful, smelly ritual. It was a painful, smelly ritual with a genuine payoff. But this leads to another practical question that would be on anyone's mind. How long did it last? You go through that whole meticulous process of painting your teeth. Does it last a week, a month, or is the upkeep even more demanding than we imagine? The answer, you might be disappointed to hear, is that a perfect, glossy black finish was frustratingly temporary. This was not a one-and-done procedure. Maintaining the ideal look required constant, diligent effort. You couldn't just blacken your teeth once at your wedding and be set for life. You had to do it over and over and over again. Think about what your mouth goes through in a single day. You eat, you drink, you produce saliva. All of these things create friction and introduce acidic or abrasive substances that would begin to wear away at the delicate lacquer. The beautiful, uniform black would start to fade and become patchy. The gloss would dull. Little flecks might even chip off, revealing the natural ivory color of the tooth underneath. This was considered a very poor look, a sign of laziness or neglect. A woman of high standing was expected to have a consistently perfect, deep black smile. So, how often did they have to reapply it? The general consensus among historians, based on descriptions in literature and personal diaries from the period, is that a full reapplication was necessary every 2 to 3 days. For those who were particularly fastidious or had an important social event to attend, it was a daily ritual. Every single morning, or at least most mornings, would involve that 15 to 30-minute process of cleaning, mixing a fresh batch of dye, and carefully painting each tooth. Imagine the sheer dedication. It becomes less like applying makeup and more like a fundamental part of personal hygiene, as routine as washing your face or combing your hair, but significantly more time-consuming and unpleasant. It was a constant, low-level burden in the life of anyone who practiced it. This constant need for reapplication also explains the importance of the dye's recipe. The quality of your cane mise and fushi powder really mattered. A well-made dye would adhere better and last longer, perhaps buying you an extra day before you needed to do it all again. This is why households treasured their iron pots and their specific methods for brewing the iron solution. A good pot, properly seasoned over years of use, was a valuable household item. Here's a quirky detail that highlights the struggle for longevity. What to do about new teeth? The Ohaguro I only stained the existing tooth enamel. It didn't affect the tooth bud growing inside the gum. This meant that as a person aged, any new tooth that erupted like a wisdom tooth would come in stark white. This created a rather awkward aesthetic problem. You'd have a mouth of beautifully lacquered black teeth with a bright white intruder in the back. The only solution was to wait until the tooth had fully erupted, and then painstakingly incorporate it into the daily blackening ritual. Furthermore, the practice wasn't always perfect. The dye could sometimes stain the gums or tongue temporarily, leading to a less than pristine look immediately after application, and achieving that perfectly even, glossy coat was a skill. A novice might end up with a streaky or matte finish. It took practice to become an expert at your own dental aesthetics. Whether the elite women of the court did it themselves or had a trusted attendant assist them is a matter of some debate and likely varied by personal preference and the specific historical era. In the Heian period, a high-ranking lady who could barely dress herself would almost certainly have had help. In the later Edo period, it may have been seen as a more personal, private task that a woman would perform herself. The relentless cycle of fading and reapplication is a crucial part of the story. It transforms Ohaguro from a static symbol into a dynamic, ongoing performance of status. The beauty wasn't just in the black teeth themselves, but in the visible proof of the daily discipline required to maintain them. A perfect smile was a testament to the fact that you had the time, the resources, and the personal fortitude to engage in this demanding ritual every single day. It was a quiet but constant broadcast of your refined and orderly life. It makes you appreciate the simple, long-lasting convenience of a tube of toothpaste, doesn't it? You're beginning to get a full picture of the Ohaguro lifestyle. It's a world of strange smells, bitter tastes, and a demanding daily schedule. But as you continue to observe the social interactions in this refined world, you notice a subtle, yet pervasive, gesture. A woman is talking to a friend, and as she lets out a light laugh, she raises the long, elegant sleeve of her kimono to delicately cover her mouth. Later, at a poetry gathering, another woman listens intently, holding a beautiful, painted fan that just happens to be positioned in front of her lower face. This gesture, the act of hiding one's mouth when smiling or laughing, is an image we often associate with traditional Japan. It's frequently interpreted as a sign of modesty, a gesture of demure elegance and feminine grace, and that is certainly a huge part of it. In a culture that valued emotional restraint, a wide, open-mouthed laugh was considered unseemly, unchildish. Covering the mouth was a way to soften the expression, to keep one's composure, and to adhere to a strict code of etiquette. But now, with your newfound knowledge of Ohaguro, you can see a second, much more practical layer to this tradition. Hiding the smile wasn't just about emotional modesty, it was also, at times, about aesthetic quality control. As we've established, maintaining a perfect, seamless black was a relentless chore, and life, then as now, is imperfect. What if you were in a rush this morning and your application was a bit streaky? What if a small chip of the lacquer had flaked off one of your front teeth, revealing a distracting sliver of white? What if the dye was a day old and had faded to a less than desirable brownish black instead of a deep, glossy jet? These minor imperfections would be a source of social anxiety for a woman of high standing. Her appearance was a reflection of her family's status and her own personal refinement. A flawed Ohaguro was like having a visible stain on a pristine white dress. It suggested a lapse in diligence. So, the graceful gesture of raising a sleeve or a fan became a brilliant, multi-purpose social tool. On the one hand, it fulfilled the demands of proper etiquette, broadcasting your modesty and good breeding. On the other, it was a subtle and elegant way to hide the evidence if your dental lacquer wasn't quite up to par that day. It was a beautiful solution to a practical problem. It allowed a woman to participate in social life with confidence, even if her morning's cosmetic ritual had been less than perfect. This adds a fascinating human element to the practice. It's a reminder that these were not flawless dolls, but real people dealing with the daily annoyances of their beauty standards. The pressure to appear perfect was immense, and they developed sophisticated, graceful ways to manage that pressure. And here's a little-known detail that ties into this: the concept of the glancing beauty. In classical Japanese aesthetics, particularly in the Heian period, beauty was often about what was suggested rather than what was explicitly shown. A woman hidden behind a screen, with only her sleeve and a cascade of hair visible, was considered more alluring than a woman in full view. Beauty was in the glimpse, the hint, the part that was left to the imagination. The gesture of covering the mouth fits perfectly into this aesthetic. The hidden smile was, in a way, more intriguing than the revealed one. It made the expression more enigmatic and subtle. It drew attention back to the eyes, which were considered the true windows to the soul. Historians of art and literature still debate how much of this gesture was driven by formal etiquette versus these practical, aesthetic concerns. The truth is likely that they were deeply intertwined, each one reinforcing the other until the action became second nature. So the next time you see an old woodblock print, or a movie depicting a woman in a kimono gracefully hiding her smile behind a fan, you'll see it with new eyes. You'll see the demureness and the elegance. Yes, but you'll also see the quiet, clever trick of a woman who might be thinking, I really hope no one notices I missed a spot on my left incisor this morning. It's a small act of stage management in the grand theater of social life. A beautiful piece of choreography that is both polite and profoundly practical. Your journey so far has been confined to the rarefied air of the imperial court and the stark keeps of the samurai. You've seen Ohaguro as a symbol of the absolute elite. A practice that separates the noble from the commoner, the refined from the rustic. For centuries, this was largely true. The complex recipe, the time-consuming application, and the very philosophy behind it belonged to the top echelons of society. But history, like culture, is not static. It flows downwards, seeping from the peaks of power into the wider valleys of everyday life. Let's allow time to fast forward, relieving the graceful, poetic world of Heian behind. The centuries roll by. The power of the emperor and his court wanes, and the samurai class, once just rural warriors, rise to become the de facto rulers of Japan. We're now entering the Edo period, a long era of relative peace and stability under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, stretching from the early 1600 seconds to the mid-1800 seconds. And in this new world, society is changing. A vibrant, bustling urban culture is emerging in cities like Edo, modern-day Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto. A powerful merchant class, the Chorin, is gaining wealth and influence. They may not have noble blood, but they have money, and with money comes the desire to emulate the lifestyles of their social superiors. The strict class divides are still there, but the cultural boundaries are becoming more porous, and one of the most visible symbols they begin to adopt is Ohaguro. You are now standing not in a pristine gravel courtyard, but on a crowded, muddy street in the heart of Edo. The air is thick with the smells of street food, wood smoke, and the press of thousands of people. The scene is a riot of color and sound. You see shopkeepers hawking their wares, artisans working in open-fronted workshops, and women in brightly colored kimonos haggling over the price of fabric. And here, in this lively, chaotic, middle-class world, you see it again, the black-toothed smile. It's the wife of a prosperous timber merchant, her teeth perfectly blackened as a sign of her married status and her family's success. It's a popular waitress at a tea house, her dark smile part of her professional charm. It's even some women of the licensed pleasure quarters, a practice we'll delve into more deeply later. The custom has trickled down. It's no longer just for the duchesses and the general's wives, it's become an aspirational sign of being a respectable, married, urban woman. Of course, the meaning shifts slightly in this new context. For the Heian aristocrat, it was about separating herself from the barbaric world. For the Edo merchant's wife, it was more about signaling respectability and marital fidelity within her own bustling community. It was a way of saying, I am a proper, settled housewife. It became a cornerstone of urban, middle-class femininity. But how could they afford it? This is where the burgeoning consumer economy of the Edo period comes in. You no longer needed to have your own rusty nails brewing in a pot in your backyard. Entrepreneurs saw a market. You could now buy the ingredients or even pre-mixed versions of the cane misa at a local shop. A specialized profession of Ohaguro sellers emerged. They would create their own potent brews of iron water and sell it in small ceramic jars. One curious, and rather smelly, bit of historical trivia is that some of the most potent iron solutions were said to be made by soaking iron in the runoff from tanneries, which was rich in organic acids. These commercial dyes were advertised with their own brand names and touted for their superior color and longevity. This commercialization made the practice accessible to a much wider swath of the population. It was still an expense and a time commitment, but it was now within reach of the common city dweller. However, its spread was not universal. The practice remained largely an urban phenomenon. If you were to travel out into the rural farming villages, you would still find it was quite rare. A peasant woman who spent her days working in the fields simply did not have the time, the resources, or the social motivation to blacken her teeth every day. So a new social distinction was formed not just between noble and commoner, but between the sophisticated city dweller and the country bumpkin. The exact moment this transition from elite custom to popular fashion occurred is hard to pinpoint. A gradual process that historians track through art, literature, and household records of the era. They debate which social group, the samurai families or the wealthy merchants, was more influential in popularizing the trend among the masses. As you stand on that busy Edo street, you realize you're witnessing a classic cycle of fashion. What was once exclusive and subversive has become mainstream and respectable. The black-toothed smile has lost some of its aristocratic mystique, but it has gained a new, powerful role as a widespread symbol of civic identity and domestic virtue for a whole new class of people. It's no longer a secret whispered in the halls of a palace, it's a statement made proudly on the bustling streets of a nation. Your journey through the world of Ohaguro has taken you from the silent nobility to the bustling middle class. But now, We must venture into a district where beauty, status, and commerce intertwine in the most explicit and fascinating ways. We're heading to the Kyokai, the flower and willow world, the officially sanctioned pleasure districts of cities, like Edo's, Yoshiwara, or Kyoto's join. Here, in the world of the geisha and other female entertainers, Ohaguro wasn't just a custom, it was a critical part of a complex, codified system of rank, experience, and professional identity. The sun is setting, and the paper lanterns lining the narrow streets of the district are beginning to glow with a soft, inviting light. The sounds of shameful music and laughter spill from the ornate wooden tea houses. This world operates on its own set of rules, its own aesthetic language, and a key part of that language is the appearance of the women who work here. You see two women walking together down the street. At first glance, they look similar. Both are wearing beautiful, elaborate kimonos and have their faces painted with the traditional white oshiro. But if you look closely at their smiles, you will see a crucial difference that tells you everything about their status. Manuvulet, the younger of the two, is a maiko. She is an apprentice geisha, a dancing child. Her kimono is more brightly colored. Her hair ornaments are more flamboyant and dangling, and on her feet, she wears tall, lacquered wooden clogs called okobobo. She is the image of youthful, vibrant beauty, and when she smiles, her teeth are her own natural and uncolored. She does, however, wear a distinctive, heavy lipstick on her bottom lip only, a sign of her apprentice status. The other woman is a full-fledged geiko, the Kyoto term for geisha. She is older, more experienced, and her entire demeanor exudes a quiet, confident grace. Her kimono is more subdued in color and pattern. Her hair ornaments are more subtle, and when she smiles, her teeth are a perfect, glossy black. This is the rule of the flower and willow world. The application of Ohaguro was one of the final, defining steps in the ceremony of erika-e, or turning of the collar, the ritual that marked Mako's graduation to the status of a geiko. To the Mako, her natural teeth were part of her youthful appeal. They signified her innocence and her status as a trainee. But for the geiko, the black teeth were a mark of her maturity, her artistry, and her professional accomplishment. It signaled to clients that she was a master of her arts, be it dance, music, or the art of conversation, and no longer a girl in training. The black teeth, in this context, served a similar function to how they worked in mainstream society, signifying maturity and a certain kind of unavailability. While a geisha was an entertainer, her black teeth symbolically aligned her with the status of a married woman, lending her an air of respectability and seriousness within her profession. It subtly shifted her role from a playful girl to a sophisticated, accomplished woman. But here's a fascinating and slightly confusing detail for historians and enthusiasts of this culture. The rules weren't always perfectly consistent across all districts or all of history. In some eras and some locations, courtesans of the highest rank known as oiron or teiyu, who were distinct from geisha, also practiced Ohaguro as a sign of their elite status. However, in other contexts, different visual cues were used. This has led to a lot of popular confusion, with the aesthetics of geisha, Meito, and oiron often being mixed up in modern depictions. The debate among cultural historians continues over the precise etiquette and its evolution, trying to untangle the web of status symbols in this complex, closed society. For a young Mako approaching her erika-e, the first application of Ohaguro would be a momentous occasion, just as it was for the young noblewoman centuries before. It was a tangible symbol of her hard work and her arrival as a true professional. It meant she could now wear the more subdued kimonos of a senior geiko and, most importantly, she would start to earn her own living. The black teeth also served a practical aesthetic purpose within the tea house environment. Like the Heian mansions, the interiors of tea houses were often dimly lit, designed to create an atmosphere of intimacy and mystery. Against the stark white makeup, the black teeth ensured the geiko's smile was subtle and alluring, not a jarring flash of white in the candlelight. It allowed her expressions to remain elegant and controlled, a key part of her professional toolkit. So as you watch the Mako and the Gecko part ways, each heading to her respective appointment, you understand that in the flower and willow world, nothing is accidental. Every detail of their appearance, from the style of their kimono collar to the color of their teeth, is a carefully chosen symbol. It's a visual language that communicates age, rank, and skill. The Ohaguro smile here is not just a nod to tradition, it's a graduation certificate, a badge of honor, and a crucial to love the trade in one of the most aesthetically demanding professions ever conceived. Your journey has shown you Ohaguro as a mark of beauty, of status, of professionalism. But every cultural symbol has a shadow side, a reflection in a darker mirror. To see it, we must leave the tea houses and the sunlit streets and enter a world of deliberate, heightened drama. Let's find our way to a theater, to witness a performance of No or Kabuki, the classical forms of Japanese drama. The theater is dimly lit. You're sitting among a captivated audience on woven tatami mats. The stage is a stark, polished wooden platform with a stylized painting of a pine tree on the back wall. The air is electric with anticipation. The music begins a slow, eerie flute melody accompanied by the sharp, precise scratches of a hand drum. Then, a figure emerges onto the stage, moving with an unnaturally slow, gliding motion. This is not a depiction of an everyday person. This is something else. The actor is wearing a magnificent, stylized costume and a carved wooden mask. The mask is painted a deathly white, with thin, arched eyebrows and a small, downturned red mouth. It is a mask of a woman, but her expression is one of deep, profound sorrow and simmering rage. This is a classic no-character noble woman who has been betrayed or has lost a child, and has returned to the world as a vengeful spirit. As the character sings her story in a low, sonorous chant, she might make a gesture of anguish, bringing her sleeve to her face. In that moment, the mask tilts, and the light catches the features carved within its mouth, and you see it. The teeth of the mask are painted a deep, lustrous black. Here, on the stage, Ohaguro has been twisted from its original meaning. It's no longer a symbol of a respectable, living, married woman. It has become a key part of the iconography of the supernatural. By putting the black teeth on a ghost, the playwrights and mask makers were tapping into a powerful set of associations. The character is often a woman from the aristocratic class, where Ohaguro was the norm. The black teeth immediately signal her high status in her previous life, making her tragic fall all the more potent. It's a ghostly echo of the life she once lived. But it does something more. The combination of the deathly white face of the mask and the black void of the mouth creates an image that is profoundly unsettling. It's the beautiful face of the court, but drained of life, frozen in an expression of eternal sorrow. The black teeth, which in life receded into a gentle shadow, now become a gaping, empty maw on the face of a spirit. It's a visual shorthand for a beauty that has been corrupted by death and despair. This theatrical use wasn't limited to just ghosts. The same aesthetic was often used for depicting demons. A mask for a female demon, like the famously jealous Heian, might feature a terrifying, white grin full of golden fangs. But a mask for a more subtle, human-like demon might use the unsettling image of the pale face and the blackened teeth. It became a way to signify a character who was non-human, or who existed in a liminal state between the human and spirit worlds. A quirky detail for you in the more bombastic world of kabuki theater, which used make-up kumadori instead of masks for many roles. Male actors playing high-ranking female roles on Nagata would, of course, blacken their teeth as part of their costume, but they might also use Ohaguro when playing certain types of refined, aristocratic villains. The black teeth would signify the character's high status, creating a chilling contrast with his evil actions. It was a beauty that masked a rotten soul. The degree to which the theatrical use of Ohaguro influenced The popular perception of the practice is a fascinating topic that performance historians and cultural anthropologists still explore. Did the association with ghosts and demons on stage create a subconscious sense of unease around the practice in real life? Or was it the other way around? Did a pre-existing folk unease with the jarring visual of black teeth get amplified and codified on the stage? It's a classic chicken and egg question of cultural symbolism. As you watch the ghostly figure on the stage glide through her sorrowful dance, you realize the immense versatility of this single custom. In the space of a few hours, you have seen the same black-toothed smile represent marital fidelity, professional mastery, and now, supernatural horror. It is a powerful reminder that the meaning of any symbol is not inherent in the symbol itself, but is created by the context in which we see it. The blackest teeth can be beautiful, or they can be the stuff of nightmares, all depending on who is smiling. The eerie flute music of the no theater fades, but the image of that ghostly, black-toothed mask lingers in your mind. The stage is a place where cultural anxieties are played out, where symbols are twisted and reinterpreted, but the influence of Ohaguro didn't stop at the theater doors. It seeped out into the darker, more superstitious corners of the popular imagination, giving birth to a creature of folklore that perfectly captures the unsettling potential of that smile, the Ohaguro better. Ohaguro better. Let's leave the city for a moment. You're walking down a lonely country road at dusk. The shadows are getting long, and the rice paddies on either side of the path are shrouded in a light mist. The only sound is the chirping of cicadas and the soft crunch of your own footsteps. Up ahead, you see a figure. It appears to be a woman, dressed in a beautiful wedding kimono, but her back is turned to you. She seems to be weeping. Being a kind-hearted soul, you approach her cautiously. "Excuse me, miss," you might say. "Are you all right? Are you lost?" The woman's shoulders continue to shake with silent sobs. She doesn't turn around. You take a step closer, your concern growing. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Slowly, she stops crying. She straightens up. And then, with a horrificously fluid motion, she spins around to face you. The first thing you notice is that she has no face, no eyes, no nose, no eyebrows. Just a smooth, blank expanse of pale skin, like an egg, and in the center of that blankness is a single feature, a huge, gaping mouth, stretched into an unnaturally wide, manic grin, and that mouth is filled with a perfect, deep, glistening set of blackened teeth. This is the Ohaguro beta ii, a type of yokai, or supernatural monster, from Japanese folklore. The name literally translates to nothing but blackened teeth. It is a creature of pure shock value, a jump scare from a bygone horror. Its entire purpose is to appear beautiful and familiar from a distance, a bride, a woman in fine clothing, only to reveal its horrifying, featureless face and that enormous, black-toothed smile up close. This yokai is a fascinating case study in how a cultural norm can be subverted to create horror. It takes several elements of traditional beauty and identity and mashes them together into a monstrous parody. It has the fine clothing of a respectable woman, often a bride, which is the peak of feminine celebration. It has the Ohaguro, the ultimate symbol of a civilized, married woman. But it strips away all the humanizing features, the eyes that convey emotion, the nose that gives a face its character. All that is left is the social symbol, the black-toothed smile, divorced from any human context and blown up to grotesque proportions. The horror of the Ohaguro beta eye comes from this very specific betrayal of expectations. You see a familiar, reassuring image, and your brain prepares for a normal social interaction. The monster plays on this, luring you in with the promise of familiarity, only to shatter that reality in the most jarring way possible. The black teeth, which in a human context recede into a subtle shadow, become the sole, aggressive focus of the creature's face. Folklore sits still untangling the exact origins and meanings of this particular monster. Is it a cautionary tale? A warning against talking to strangers on lonely roads? Is it a manifestation of male anxiety about the unknowable nature of women? hidden behind their makeup and social roles, or is it simply a spooky story that evolved from the visually jarring potential of the Ohaguro smile itself? The debate continues, as it often does with the murky origins of folk tales. Interestingly, the Ohaguro better eye is often confused with another faceless yokai. The no PPR Abo, the faceless ghost. The no PPR Abo also appears as a normal human before wiping its face clean to reveal a smooth blank. But the classic no PPR Abo has no features at all. The Ohaguro better eye is a distinct, and arguably more grotesque, variant, distinguished by its single, enormous, black-toothed grin. This creature demonstrates how a symbol of high society can be reappropriated by the folk imagination. While the elites were using Ohaguro to signify their refinement and control, the common people were telling stories around the hearth about a monster where that same feature became a symbol of chaos, horror, and the terrifyingly inhuman. It's a reminder that no symbol is owned by a single group. Once it enters the public consciousness, it can take on a life of its own, appearing in poetry, on the stage, and even as a monster lurking in the twilight mist, waiting for a curious traveler to come just a little bit closer. You've seen the black-toothed smile in the refined court, on the stoic battlefield, on the bustling city street, and even in the ghastly grin of a monster. It seems like a single, monolithic tradition, but a practice that lasts for over 1,000 years is never static. It evolves. It changes. The ideal of the perfect black-toothed smile was not the same in the 10th century as it was in the 17th. Like any fashion, Ohaguro had its own shifting trends and subtle variations across the ages. Let's rewind time again, back to the beginning, to the Heian period 790 for 1185. Here, in the cradle of the custom, the aesthetic was deeply intertwined with the overall look of the courtly woman, the shaved eyebrows painted high on the forehead hikimeiyu, the face powdered dead white, and the teeth blackened. The goal, as we've discussed, was a kind of serene, mask-like beauty. The Ohaguro of this era was likely a deep, but perhaps not overly glossy, black. The aim was to make the mouth disappear into shadow, complementing the artificial of the rest of the face. The emphasis was on the absence of white teeth. The quality was judged by its uniformity and its ability to create a graceful void. Now, let's jump forward several hundred years, past the civil wars, into the peaceful and prosperous Edo-period 1603–1868. Society has changed, and so has the aesthetic. The stark white face powder is still used, but not always with the same opaque thickness. Eyebrows are still sometimes altered, but the high, smudgy morph brows of the Heian court are seen as archaic, and the Ohaguro itself has taken on a new dimension. In the Edo period, there was a greater emphasis on what we might call technical perfection. It wasn't just enough for the teeth to be black, they had to be a specific kind of black. The ideal was a deep, rich, wet-looking, glossy black. Think of the finest piece of polished lacquerware. That was the goal. This is the era where you see more literary and artistic references to the mirror-like shine. This is when a pinch of iridescent beetle wing powder might have been used to achieve that extra shimmer. The focus shifted slightly from simply hiding the teeth to turning the teeth themselves into a beautiful, crafted object. It was less about absence and more about a new kind of presence. A curious little tidbit from this era: there were even regional variations in the preferred style of black, just as cities today might have their own distinct fashion sense. Some historical texts suggest that the women of Kyoto, the old imperial capital, preferred a slightly different finish or shade of black compared to the women of Edo, the new, bustling shogunal capital. It was a subtle difference, perhaps in the degree of glossiness or the undertones of the black, that a connoisseur of the time would have been able to recognize. The exact nature of these regional differences is incredibly difficult for historians to prove definitively, often relying on subjective descriptions in literature, and remains a point of scholarly speculation. Furthermore, the social context had broadened immensely. In the Heian period, Ohaguro was for a tiny sliver of the population. In the Edo period, It was practiced by a much wider range of people, from samurai wives to merchants' wives to geisha. This meant that the quality of one's Ohaguro could also become a more nuanced class signal. A wealthy woman could afford the finest ingredients, the best commercial dyes, and had the leisure time to ensure a perfect, glossy application every single day. A woman from a lower middle-class background might have used cheaper, less effective ingredients. The result was a visual manifestation of their economic status. Your smile wasn't just a sign of your marital status, it was a subtle indicator of your household's disposable income. So you see, the black-toothed smile you're witnessing is not a single, unchanging image. It's a reflection of its time. The Heian smile was part of a holistic, otherworldly mask. The Edo smile was a piece of personal craftsmanship, a glossy status symbol in a world of burgeoning consumerism. The continuity of the practice is remarkable, but within that continuity lies a rich history of changing tastes, technological improvements in dye making, and shifting social meanings. The woman on the 10th century veranda and the merchant's wife on the 17th century street were part of the same long tradition. But they were expressing that tradition in subtly different, era-specific ways. The past, just like the present, had its own evolving sense of what was in vogue. You've explored the why, the how, and the who of Ohaguro. The custom seems all-encompassing in the world you've visited. It was the standard of beauty, a mark of status, and a sign of respectability. This naturally leads to a new, and rather unsettling, question: what if you didn't want to do it? What if a young woman, upon her marriage, decided she preferred her natural teeth? What was the social cost of opting out? In a society where tradition and conformity were held in the highest regard, choosing to reject a practice as deeply embedded as Ohaguro was not a simple act of personal preference. It was a radical statement, and one that would have come with significant social consequences. To understand the pressure, you have to see it not as a mere cosmetic choice, but as a rejection of a fundamental social contract. Let's imagine a young samurai's wife in the Edo period. Let's call her Hana. Her husband is a man of some standing, and they live within a tight-knit community of other samurai families. All the other married women in her circle have practiced Ohaguro since their wedding day. It is simply what is done, but Hana, for whatever reason, perhaps she can't stand the taste. Perhaps she finds the daily ritual too burdensome, or perhaps she simply has a rebellious streak, decides not to. The first reaction she would face is confusion. Her mother-in-law would be the first to speak to her, her tone a mixture of concern and disapproval. Hana, my dear, your teeth. Are you unwell? Have you forgotten? The assumption would not be that she was making a choice, but that there was something wrong. It would be seen as a failure of her duties, a lapse in her understanding of what it means to be a proper wife. When she would visit with the other wives in the neighborhood, she would become the subject of whispered gossip. Her bright, white teeth, which we would see as healthy and beautiful, would be seen as bizarre and almost aggressive. In a room full of demure, shadowy smiles, her natural smile would be a jarring flash of bone. The other woman would see it as a sign of immaturity. She still has the mouth of a child. They might whisper behind their fans. Does she not understand she is a wife now? Her white teeth would be interpreted as a sign of disrespect, not just to her husband and his family, but to the entire community. It would suggest that she doesn't take her role seriously. It could even be seen as a sign of questionable morals, since Ohaguro was so closely tied to marital fidelity. A woman who refused to blacken her teeth might be suspected of advertising her availability, of not being truly settled. It would be a stain on her reputation. Here's a small but powerful detail: the term shirohabaichi, meaning white teeth, while literally descriptive, could be used in a pejorative sense when referring to a married woman. It implied she was rustic, uncultured, or willfully defiant of social norms. The pressure would be immense and constant. Her husband would be embarrassed. His peers might subtly mock him. Is your wife still a girl? They might joke. A joke with a sharp, critical edge. His own reputation could suffer. Her decision would reflect on him, suggesting he couldn't control his own household. He would likely pressure her, beg her, or even command her to conform. The consequences weren't legal, of course. There was no law forcing women to blacken their teeth. The enforcement was purely social. But, in many ways, that was even more powerful. It was the punishment of being ostracized, of being perpetually other-ed within your own community. It would be a lonely and difficult existence. Did women like Hannah actually exist? It's incredibly difficult to say for certain. The historical record is, by its nature, written by those who followed the rules, not those who bred them. Personal acts of defiance rarely make it into official documents. However, historians speculate that such dissent must have occurred, even if it was rare. The debate among social historians is not if women ever resisted, but how they might have done so. Did they feign illness? Did they perform the ritual purely on purpose? Or did a few truly brave souls simply refuse? To choose not to blacken your teeth was to choose to be an outsider. It was to invite suspicion, ridicule, and shame upon yourself and your family. You would have to be incredibly strong-willed, or perhaps incredibly isolated, to withstand the kind of pressure. For the vast majority of women, it was simply easier, safer, and more socially advantageous to pick up the brush every morning and paint on the smile that everyone expected to see. The cost of conformity was a foul taste in your mouth. The cost of rebellion was your place in the world. You felt the immense social pressure to conform. The weight of tradition that made Ohaguro feel less like a choice and more like a necessity. But social pressure wasn't the only factor at play. Let's look at this custom through a different, much more practical lens, the lens of economics. Maintaining that perfect, glossy black smile wasn't free. It was a line item in the household budget. And like any expense, it tells a story about wealth, class, and the hidden costs of beauty. Let's go back to that bustling Edo street. You see the wife of a wealthy rice broker. Her kimono is made of fine silk crepe. Her hair is held in place with an exquisite tortoiseshell comb, and her smile is a flawless, jet black lacquer. Now, look across the street at the wife of a struggling carpenter. She is also a respectable married woman, and she too has blackened teeth. But, if you look closely, you might notice her smile is a little duller, a little less perfect. The difference between those two smiles can be measured in mon, the currency of the day. Let's do a little back of the napkin accounting for a middle-class household in the 18th century. First, you need the ingredients. While a rural family might still use the DIY method with rusty nails from the shed, an urban family would most likely purchase their supplies. You'd need to buy your cane mixer, the iron solution. A savvy shopkeeper might sell different grades. A basic, pungent brew might be cheap, but a premium, longer-lasting, less foul-tasting version would cost more. Then you'd need the fushi, the walnut powder. This also came in different qualities, with finely ground, pure powder being more expensive than a coarser, less potent variety. Then there are the tools. A basic set of simple ceramic bowl and a rudimentary brush might be affordable, but a woman of means would have a beautiful, ornate Ohaguro set. The bowl and pots would be fine porcelain or exquisite lacquerware, perhaps decorated with gold leaf. Her brushes would be made with the finest, softest animal hair, with elegant bamboo or even ivory handles. This set was a status symbol in itself, something to be displayed on her vanity. And let's not forget the potential luxury additives. That pinch of iridescent beetle wing powder for an extra shimmer that was an exotic and expensive ingredient. Spices like cloves or cinnamon to try and mask the taste, those were imported and costly. These little additions were the equivalent of buying designer makeup today. They signaled a level of wealth that went beyond mere necessity. For a wealthy family, this was a trivial expense, but for a family on a tight budget, the cost of maintaining a proper smile could be a real strain. They might have to stretch their dye, using it for an extra day or two. Even if it meant the finish was faded, they might use cheaper, less effective ingredients. The result was a visual manifestation of their economic status. in a society so attuned to subtle visual cues. The quality of a woman's Ohaguro became one more way to gauge her family's wealth. This economic dimension became even more pronounced as the practice spread. When it was just the nobility, everyone was, by definition, rich. But when it became a middle-class phenomenon, it created a new spectrum of quality. It's a classic case of what economists call conspicuous consumption. The act itself signals status, but the quality of the act signals your precise place within that status group. The existence of a commercial market for Ohaguro products is a historical fact, but the exact cost and its proportion of a typical household budget is one of those granular details that economic historians are still trying to piece together. They examine merchant account books, family diaries, and the prices listed in old commercial guides to try and build a model of this microeconomy. It's a painstaking process of trying to understand the financial reality behind the cultural practice. So when you see a woman's black-toothed smile, you're not just seeing her marital status. You're seeing an economic indicator. You're seeing the result of her household's purchasing power, their access to quality goods, and their priorities in spending. That simple smile is a complex ledger of social standing and financial health. It's a reminder that even the most intimate and personal beauty rituals are deeply connected to the cold, hard reality of who can afford to look proper. The most beautiful smile wasn't just born of dedication, it was also bought and paid for. For more than 1,000 years. The world of Ohaguro has been an internally coherent system, from the Heian court to the streets of Edo. The logic held firm white teeth were for children and the uncivilized, while black teeth were for respectable, mature adults. The standards were Japanese, the materials were Japanese, and the meaning was understood by everyone within that world. But no culture exists in a vacuum forever. Sooner or later, the outside world comes knocking. Let time surge forward again, to a pivotal moment in history. The year is 1853. You are standing on a beach near the village of Uraga, just south of Edo. The day is hazy and humid. The local fishermen are tending their nets, their movements practiced and ancient. Suddenly, a shadow falls over the water. It's a ship, but it's unlike any ship you have ever seen. It's not a graceful wooden junk with paper sails. It is a massive, hulking vessel, moving without sails, its black hull plated with iron. A thick column of black smoke billows from a smokestack, staining the clean sky, and then another appears. And another. These are the black ships of United States Navy Commodore Matthew C. Perry. This moment is a profound shock to the system. For over 200 years, Japan had been in a state of self-imposed isolation, with very limited trade and contact with the outside world. Perry's arrival, backed by the implicit threat of his powerful steam frigates and their cannons, was an ultimatum: open your country to trade, or face the consequences. This event didn't just force a political and economic opening, it triggered a massive, wrenching crisis of cultural identity. Suddenly, the Japanese were confronted with a new, and technologically superior, model of civilization, and the people who represented this new power, the Americans. And soon after, the Europeans looked very different. They were tall, with different colored hair and eyes, and when they smiled, their teeth were shockingly, brilliantly white. Imagine a Japanese official, a semi-bureaucrat, sent to negotiate with the Americans. He is a man of culture and refinement. He has his hair in a traditional topknot. He wears a fine silk kimono, and his teeth are, of course, impeccably blackened. He sits down across from an American naval officer. The officer is dressed in a stark wool uniform. His hair is cut short, and he smiles a wide, confident, toothy grin. In that moment, two worlds collide. To the Japanese official, the American's white-toothed smile might look feral, childish, or even barbaric by his own standards. To the American officer, the official's black teeth would look bizarre, unhealthy, and hideous. But the crucial difference was the power dynamic. The Americans had the bigger ships, Their definition of civilized was arriving with overwhelming force. This encounter, and the thousands of interactions that followed as Japan opened up, planted a seed of doubt. The old certainties began to crumble. Could a custom like Ohaguro truly be a sign of sophistication if the most powerful and advanced people in the world found it repulsive? The very foundation of Japanese aesthetics, which had been built and reinforced over centuries, was now being questioned. A new term, Bunmikai, or civilization and enlightenment, became the slogan of the era. It was a call for Japan to modernize, to adopt Western technology, science, and customs in order to catch up and avoid being colonized like so many other Asian nations. This meant building railways, creating a modern army, and reforming the government. But it also meant changing the way people looked. The debate over which customs to keep and which to discard was fierce and is still studied by historians as a period of profound cultural upheaval. Was it possible to adopt Western technology without losing the Japanese spirit? Some argued that customs, like Ohaguro, were essential parts of their identity. Others argued they were embarrassing, feudal relics that made Japan look backward in the eyes of the world. They contended that to be taken seriously on the world stage, Japan had to look the part. The arrival of the black ships didn't end Ohaguro overnight, but it was the beginning of the end. It shattered the cultural bubble in which the practice made sense. It introduced a new, competing standard of beauty. One that was backed by the undeniable power of industrial might. The black-toothed smile, once a symbol of being at the pinnacle of one's own world, was now at risk of becoming a symbol of being left behind by the new, global one. The tide of history was turning, and it was threatening to wash away 1,000 years of tradition. The black ships have breached the gates, and a flood of new ideas is pouring into Japan. The old shogunate, unable to handle the foreign crisis, has crumbled. In its place, a new government has been formed, centered around the young Emperor Meiji. This is the Meiji Restoration of 1868, a period of radical, top-down transformation. The new slogan, Bunmikai calls civilization and enlightenment, is now the driving force of the nation, and the new leaders understand something crucial to change a nation. You must change its symbols. The most powerful symbols in any nation are its leaders. The emperor, who for centuries had been a secluded, divine figurehead in Kyoto, was now being thrust into the public eye as the symbol of a new, modern Japan. His appearance, and that of the imperial family, would set the tone for the entire country. And it is here, in the heart of the imperial court, that Ohaguro would receive its most decisive and symbolic blow. On February 5th, Yaobachi-sen, a small, simple notice was issued by the government. It stated that from that day forward, the Emperor Meiji and the Empress Hoken would no longer practice the ancient customs of eyebrow shaving and teeth blackening. The Emperor would keep his eyebrows, and the Empress, whose teeth had been blackened in accordance with tradition, would let the lacquer wear off and reveal her natural, white teeth to the public. This was not a law. It was not a ban. It was a statement, but coming from the throne. Its power was immense. It was a quiet, yet revolutionary, act of cultural leadership. Let's pause to appreciate the significance of this for the Empress herself. Empress Hoken was a woman raised in the old aristocratic traditions. She had her eyebrows shaved and her teeth blackened as a young woman, just as generations of noble women before her had done. For her, this was the definition of beauty and propriety. Now, for the good of the nation, she was being asked to abandon it, to embrace a foreign aesthetic, and to present a face to the world that would have been considered shockingly improper just a few years earlier. Her personal sacrifice was a public symbol of Japan's sacrifice of its old ways on the altar of modernization. The effect of this imperial declaration was immediate and profound. It was like a switch had been flipped. For centuries, the pinnacle of fashion and taste had been set by the court. If the Empress herself was now embracing white teeth, then white teeth were now the new standard of beauty for a modern, civilized Japanese woman. The news spread rapidly through the newly established newspapers and by word of mouth. For the upper class and ambitious middle class families who had so diligently practiced Ohaguro to emulate their social superiors, the message was clear: the trend was over. To continue to blacken your teeth was no longer a sign of sophistication. Overnight, it became a sign of being old-fashioned, feudal, and out of touch with the new Japan. It was a declaration that you were stuck in the past. Here's a small but telling anecdote about the change. A popular woodblock print from the era depicts a modern scene at a dinner party. It shows Japanese men and women in a mixture of Western and Japanese clothing, sitting on chairs at a table, a novelty in itself, and a maid is serving them. The caption praises the scene's enlightenment, and one of the points it highlights is that the women have white teeth, just like foreigners. This imperial decree triggered a massive, nationwide shift in beauty standards. What had been beautiful for a millennium was now, officially, no longer beautiful. This rapid reversal is a fascinating case study for sociologists and historians who study the power of elite emulation. The debate continues on whether the government's push was the sole cause, or if it was merely accelerating a change that was already beginning to happen as more Japanese people were exposed to Westerners. Most agree it was a powerful combination of both. The Empress's new smile became a symbol of the new Japan. It was a smile that looked towards the West, a smile that was ready for the world stage. The government had effectively weaponized fashion. They understood that you could pass laws to build factories and railways, but to truly change the hearts and minds of the people, you had to change what they saw in the mirror. By changing the imperial smile, they began to change the face of an entire nation. The gentle, shadowy smile of old Japan was giving way to the bright, forward-looking smile of the Meiji era. The Empress has shown her white teeth. The new standard of beauty has been set from the very top. But the Meiji government, in its rush to modernize, knew that symbolic gestures alone were not enough. To forge a new national identity and present a civilized face to the West, they needed to dismantle the old symbols of the feudal era more forcefully. This led to a series of decrees and laws aimed at changing the very appearance of the Japanese people, particularly the men of the former samurai class. The year is 1871. Just a few years after the Restoration, the government issues the Danpatsu Rei, the cropped hair edict. This decree recommended that samurai cut off their traditional top knots. John Meiji and adopt Western-style haircuts. The top knot, like Ohaguro, was a powerful symbol of the old warrior class and the feudal system. To the new government, it was a relic. To Westerners, it looked strange and backward. Cutting it off was a physical act of severing ties with the past and embracing the new era. You can imagine the scene. A samurai who has worn his hair in a top knot his entire life, whose father and grandfather wore it before him, now stands before a barber, preparing to have it shorn off. It wasn't just a haircut, it was an identity crisis. Many resisted, clinging to the old ways. But the social and professional pressure was immense. To get a job in the new government, the new army, or a modern company, you needed to look the part. The top knot quickly became a symbol of unemployment and resistance to progress. Now, let's fast forward to 1876. The government delivers another, even more profound blow to the samurai identity, the Hai-2-Ai, the Sword Abolishment Edict. This law forbade the former samurai from wearing their two swords, the Daiso, in public, for centuries. The two swords had been the exclusive right in the very soul of the samurai. To be without them was to be stripped of their class identity. This law effectively dissolved the samurai as a distinct social class. Where does Ohaguro fit into all this? While the imperial family's choice in 1873 had set the trend against it, the government solidified this by including it in their broader campaign against uncivilized customs. In 1870, even before the Empress's announcement, a government ordinance was issued that labeled practices like tattooing and Ohaguro as bad customs and prohibited them for nobles and high-ranking officials. So you have a perfect storm of official disapproval. The Emperor and Empress abandon it. The government officially discourages it for the ruling class. The visual symbols of the old elite, the top knot, The swords, the black teeth are all being systematically dismantled. The effect on the general population was a kind of cultural whiplash. Imagine being a merchant's wife in Osaka. For your entire life, you have been taught that a respectable married woman has black teeth. You've enjoyed the daily ritual, spent money on the dyes, and taken pride in your smile. Now, suddenly, the newspapers, the government, and the fashionable elite are all telling you that what you are doing is ugly, backward, and shameful. There was resistance. Of course, not everyone abandoned the practice overnight. In more rural, isolated areas, the old ways persisted for years, even decades, but in the cities, the change was swift and brutal. Women who continued to practice Ohaguro were now the ones who were stared at, whispered about, and seen as country bumpkins clinging to a bygone era. The social pressure completely inverted. A fascinating, and somewhat sad, little detail from this period is the emergence of advertisements for new products, tooth powders, and early toothbrushes designed to whiten teeth. These ads often explicitly contrasted the beautiful, shining, white teeth of the modern woman with the ugly, dirty, black teeth of the past. The very thing that had been a source of pride was now being used as a marketing tool to shame women into buying new products. The exact legality of Ohaguro for commoners was a bit murky. While officials were banned from it, there wasn't a strictly enforced nationwide law against the average person practicing it. The debate among legal historians is whether this was a deliberate choice to allow the custom to fade naturally or simply a matter of the government having bigger fish to fry. Regardless, the effect was the same. The combination of elite rejection, official discouragement, and social pressure was a death sentence for the 1,000-year-old tradition. You are witnessing the deliberate, state-sponsored destruction of an aesthetic. The government wasn't just building a new country, it was curating a new population, one that would look acceptable to the powerful Western nations they were so desperate to impress. The black-toothed smile, along with the top knot and the twin swords, was being consigned to the Museum of History. The great wave of Meiji-era modernization has crashed over Japan, washing away the old customs. The top knots are gone, the swords are hung on walls, and the streets of Tokyo and Osaka are now filled with the bright, white smiles of a new generation. The black-toothed smile, once the very definition of civilized beauty, has become a relic. But a tradition that has endured for a millennium doesn't simply vanish without a trace. It lingers on in the quiet corners of the country, and in the hearts of those who cannot, or will not, change. Let's travel forward in time one last bit, to the very late 19th or even the early 20th century. We're far away from the bustling, westernized cities. You are in a small, sleepy village nestled in a remote mountain valley. Here, the frantic pace of Banmeek Aiko feels like a distant rumor. Life moves to the rhythm of the seasons, as it always has. You see an old woman sitting on the veranda of a traditional farmhouse, her hands wrinkled and stained from a lifetime of work. She is mending a piece of clothing, her movements slow and deliberate. Her face is a roadmap of her long life, etched with deep lines. When she looks up to greet you, she gives you a warm, gentle smile, and her teeth are a deep, glossy black. She is one of the last. A woman who came of age and was married long before the black ships ever arrived. Long before the emperor decreed a new way to be beautiful. For her, Ohaguro is not a fashion statement to be adopted or discarded. It is a fundamental part of her identity. It is the smile of her mother and her grandmother. It is the smile she showed her husband on their wedding day. It is intertwined with every memory of her adult life. She might tell you stories, her voice a little raspy with age. She might talk about how the young girls in the village now laugh at her, calling her old-fashioned, her own granddaughters, who go to the new government school and read magazines with pictures of Western actresses. Beg her to stop. Grandmother, it's embarrassing. They say, it makes you look like a ghost from a story. She doesn't quite understand their world. To her, their brilliant white teeth look strange and unfinished, like the teeth of a child. She might even confide in you that she thinks white teeth look unclean, a faint echo of the ancient belief. She continues the daily ritual not out of defiance, but out of habit, out of a deep, ingrained sense of what is right and proper for a woman of her generation. The foul taste of the dye is as familiar to her as the taste of her morning tea. Her existence highlights the generational gap created by the Meiji reforms. It was a chasm that separated parents from children, and grandparents from grandchildren. What was a cherished tradition for one generation became a source of deep shame for the next. This old woman, in her quiet, steadfast adherence to the past, is a living embodiment of that cultural conflict. Historians on death-grapers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries were fascinated by these holdouts. They would travel to remote areas specifically to document and photograph the last practitioners of customs like Ohaguro and tattooing. They were trying to capture a snapshot of old Japan before it disappeared completely. The very fact that these women became subjects of academic study shows how alien the practice had become to the mainstream. There's a debate amongst social historians about the psychology of these last practitioners. Were they all simply creatures of habit, unable to change, or was there an element of quiet resistance in their actions by continuing to blacken her teeth? Was this old woman making a silent statement that the new world, with all its frantic change, had not completely conquered her spirit? Was it an act of preserving her own personal history in a world that was trying to erase it? As you look at her, you don't see a relic or an academic subject. You see a person caught between two worlds. Her black smile is a bridge to a past that is rapidly fading from memory. It is a testament to the resilience of personal identity in the face of overwhelming historical change. She is the final, fading brushstroke of a 1,000-year-old masterpiece. A quiet, dignified end to a long, uncomplicated story. Her smile is no longer about fashion or status, it's about memory. The image of that old woman, a living link to a forgotten past, begins to fade. The real, breathing tradition is gone, survived only by a few aging holdouts in remote villages. The visceral reality of the taste, the smell, and the daily ritual now belongs only to them. For everyone else, Ohaguro is receding into the realm of memory. And one of the most powerful vessels for memory is the photograph. Let's step into a different kind of archive, not a bustling street or a silent temple, but a quiet, dusty room where you are carefully flipping through a collection of late 19th century photographs. These are some of the earliest images ever taken in Japan, captured on fragile glass plates or album on prints by both pioneering Japanese photographers and adventurous Westerners. They are sepia-toned windows into a world in transition. You pick up a small, stiff photograph, a carte de visite. It shows a samurai family, posed stiffly in a photographer's studio. The father wears a mix of Western and Japanese attire, a traditional kimono topped with a Western-style bowler hat. His face is stern, his hair cut short. His wife sits beside him, dressed in a somber, beautiful kimono. She is looking directly at the camera, her expression unreadable, and when you look closely, you can just make out the dark, non-reflective quality of her mouth. She has Ohaguro. The photograph has captured one of the last generations to practice the custom as a matter of course. You move to another image. This one is a hand-colored lantern slide, where a photographic image has been painstakingly painted with translucent colors. It depicts two women identified as tea house waitresses. They are laughing, their faces full of life. One woman's teeth are white, the others are black. The colorist has carefully applied a dab of black ink to her mouth. This single image captures the moment of transition perfectly. It's a world where the old and the new coexisted, where two different standards of beauty could literally be standing side by side. These old photographs are invaluable historical documents, but they are also tricky to interpret. Photography in the 19th century was a slow, deliberate process. The subjects had to hold a pose for several seconds, even minutes. This means the expressions you see are not candid snapshots, they are carefully constructed performances for the camera. The unsmiling, Serious faces we often see in these portraits might be due to the technical limitations of the medium, not necessarily a reflection of the person's mood. Furthermore, many of these photographs, especially those taken by Westerners for a Western audience, were staged. Photographers would hire models, geisha, laborers, actors, and have them pose in ways that conform to Western stereotypes of exotic Japan. A photo labeled a Japanese bride might not be of a real bride at all, but a model dressed in wedding attire. This is where a key debate for photo historians comes in. When we see a photograph of a woman with Ohaguro from this period, are we seeing an authentic document of a real person's daily life, or are we seeing a commercialized, staged representation of a custom that was already becoming rare, packaged for foreign consumption in many cases? The answer is likely a bit of both. The photographers were documenting a real custom, but they were often framing it in a way that emphasized its exoticity. Look at this next photo. It's a close-up portrait of a woman identified as a geiko. Her white makeup is flawless. Her kimono collar is elegant, and her teeth are a deep black. The photographer has lit her face in a way that emphasizes the contrast. The image is beautiful, but also slightly ethnographic, as if she were a specimen being documented. The black teeth become the primary subject of the photo. You are forced to confront the custom in a way that a casual passerby on the street never would. Flipping through these images is like attending a silent, frozen funeral for a lost aesthetic. Each photograph is a ghost. The people in them are long gone, and the custom they practiced has vanished from daily life. Yet, here they are, their black-toothed smiles preserved forever in silver and gelatin. They stare out at you from across the decades, their expressions challenging you to understand their world. These photos are the last, definitive evidence, the final, fading gaze of the women who once believed that the most beautiful smile was a dark one. The old photographs are placed carefully back in their protective sleeves. The last living practitioners have faded into history. The story of Ohaguro as a living, breathing tradition seems to be well and truly over. But cultural practices, especially ones with such deep historical roots, rarely die completely. They often find a new life, an echo, in the modern world. They are resurrected in art, preserved in ritual, and sometimes even reappropriated by new generations for entirely different reasons. Let's return to the present day, to modern Japan. You won't see black-toothed smiles on the morning subway or in the boardrooms of Tokyo, but if you know where to look, you can still find the ghost of Ohaguro making special appearances. Your first stop is a movie set. A director is filming a JDGEK, a historical period drama set in the Edo period. The lead actress, playing the wife of the powerful samurai, sits in the makeup chair for hours. Her transformation is meticulous. The white face powder, the elaborate wig, the multi-layered kimono, and for the final touch, a makeup artist carefully paints her teeth with a modern, non-toxic, food-grade black coloring. When she steps onto the set and smiles, she brings the aesthetic of the past to life for a modern audience. In film and television, Ohaguro lives on as a vital piece of historical costuming, a visual shorthand that instantly transports the viewer to another era. Next, you travel to Kyoto to witness a local festival, a matsuri. In certain historical parades, participants will dress up as figures from Japan's past. You might see a procession of people dressed as Heian-era courtiers or Edo-period merchants. And among them, some of the female participants, in their commitment to historical accuracy, will have blackened their teeth for the day. It's a temporary transformation, a respectful nod to the ancestors whose lives they are celebrating. Here, Ohaguro is not a daily burden, but a special occasion tribute, a way of connecting with a shared cultural heritage. Now let's go back to the world of the geisha. In modern Joy, the custom of Ohaguro for a geiko is almost entirely gone. It faded out through the early and mid-20th century. However, there is one very specific and rare exception. When a maiko undergoes her erika-e ceremony to become a full geiko, she will, For a very brief period, perhaps just a few weeks surrounding her official debut, blacken her teeth. It is a deeply symbolic act, a ritualistic nod to the traditions of her profession. It is done to honor the history and the generations of geiko who came before her. Once this debut period is over, she will allow the black to fade and will not practice it again in her daily life. It has become a transient, ceremonial rite of passage rather than a permanent feature of her identity. The exact reasons for its discontinuance in the geisha world are debated by scholars of the yokai. Was it simply following the national trend? Was it a practical matter in the age of electric lighting, which made the effect less flattering, or was it a response to the changing tastes of their kai? Until the consensus is that it was a combination of all these factors. But the most surprising echo of Ohaguro might be found in the edgy, avant-garde world of modern Japanese subcultures. You might see a performer in a gothic or industrial music band, or a fashionosa in the trendy Harajuku district, who has blackened their teeth. Here, the meaning is completely inverted. It's no longer about conformity, respectability, or tradition. It is an act of rebellion, a punk rock statement. It's about shocking the mainstream, playing with historical imagery, and creating a look that is deliberately unsettling andante fashion. By adopting an ugly or primitive aesthetic from their own culture's past, they are rejecting the commercialized, westernized beauty standards of modern Japan. So, the black smile has come full circle. It began as a mark of the elite, became a symbol of middle-class respectability, was condemned as a relic of the past, and now finds new life as a tool for historical reenactment, a sacred ceremony, and a symbol of countercultural rebellion. The ghost of Ohaguro continues to haunt the Japanese imagination, a versatile and potent symbol that refuses to be forgotten. It's a testament to how a culture can constantly re-examine and repurpose its own history, finding new meanings in the old, familiar shadows. We have traced the long, winding path of Ohaguro from its zenith to its twilight, and we've even seen its ghost reappear in the modern world. We have answered the who, what, when, and where, but there is one final, tantalizing question that pulls us back, not just a few centuries, but deep into the mists of antiquity, to a time before written poetry and grand palaces. It is the ultimate question of why it started at all. Where did the very first spark of this idea come from? To find the answer, we have to become historical detectives, sifting through theories and archaeological clues. Because the truth is, no one knows for sure. The precise origin of Ohaguro is one of Japanese history's most fascinating cold cases, and scholars are still enthusiastically debating the competing theories. The first, and perhaps most widely discussed, theory is that it was an import. The idea is that the practice of blackening teeth was not born in Japan, but arrived on its shores from somewhere else. The prime suspect is Southeast Asia and southern China. For centuries before and during Japan's early history, many cultures in places like modern-day Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, and parts of Indonesia practiced betel nut chewing. Imagine a scene in a bustling port city in ancient Vietnam. You see people chewing on a small parcel, a quid, made from a slice of the coconut, wrapped in a fresh betel leaf, and often smeared with a bit of slaked lime. Chewing this quid releases a mild stimulant, but it also has a dramatic cosmetic effect. It stains the saliva a brilliant crimson, and over years of habitual use, it permanently dyes the teeth a deep, reddish black. In many of these cultures, these blackened teeth were not seen as an unsightly side effect. They were considered beautiful, a sign of maturity, and even believed to have protective or medicinal properties. Now, picture ancient mariners and traders from Japan traveling along the sea routes, or foreign envoys arriving on Japanese shores. They would have encountered these people with their dark, betel-stained smiles. It's entirely possible that the Japanese saw this look, stripped it of the actual betel chewing practice which never became widespread in Japan, and decided to replicate the aesthetic using their own local materials. They liked to result the dark teeth but invented their own method to achieve it. This would explain why Ohaguro exists in a cultural region where similar aesthetics were common. The second major theory, however, argues for a homegrown, indigenous origin. This theory suggests that the Japanese didn't need to copy anyone, they stumbled upon the idea themselves, perhaps through a convergence of existing technologies and accidental discoveries. One compelling version of this theory links Ohaguro to Japan's ancient and sophisticated craft of lacquerware, oyu-rush. The traditional process of lacquering a bowl or box involves applying thin layers of sap from the lacquer tree. This sap, when exposed to air, hardens into a durable, waterproof, and beautiful coating. To color this lacquer, artisans would mix it with pigments. A common way to create black lacquer was to mix the sap with powdered iron. Does that sound familiar? The what if here is tantalizing. What if some ancient artisan, familiar with the chemistry of lacquering objects with an iron-based mixture, made the conceptual leap from a bowl to a body part? What if they thought, if I can make this wooden cup strong and beautiful with this black coating, perhaps I can do the same for my teeth. The core principle applying a liquid that hardens into a protective, colored layer using iron is strikingly similar. Another indigenous theory bypasses aesthetics entirely and starts with health. Perhaps ancient people, suffering from toothaches or decay, discovered that chewing on certain things, like an enriched nuts, or rinsing with acidic liquids, like old vinegar, soothed the pain. They might have noticed that this process also stained their teeth black. Over time, what began as a folk remedy could have morphed into a cosmetic practice. The black teeth means healthy teeth. Observation we discussed earlier might not have been a happy side effect, but the very origin of the entire custom. So which is it, an imported fashion or a local invention? This is where the academic debate truly lies. Proponents of the import theory point to the widespread existence of similar practices in the region as strong circumstantial evidence. Proponents of the indigenous theory argue that the unique recipe, the specific use of an iron acetate and tannin solution, rather than betel nut, is a uniquely Japanese invention, suggesting an independent origin. They also point out that the earliest skeletal remains with blackened teeth found in Japan predate some of the most intense periods of cultural exchange. Ultimately, the first person to ever blacken their teeth in Japan did not leave a note explaining why. The answer is likely lost to time, a secret buried in an unmarked grave. But the mystery itself is part of the allure. It reminds us that this practice, which we have explored in such detail, has roots that run so deep they reach back into the unwritten, speculative dawn of a culture. We've traveled 1,000 years and more. We've stood in moonlit gardens and on bloody battlefields. We've peeked into the boudoir res of noble women and the tea houses of geishas. We've seen a smile that was, by turns, a symbol of high fashion, a promise of fidelity, a mark of professionalism, a true love horror, and finally, a relic of a lost world. We've picked apart its recipe, traced its certificate, and tallied its costs. And now, at the end of this long journey, we are left with one final, lingering question. The one that sits at the very heart of this whole story. How could anyone ever have thought that black teeth were beautiful? The answer is both incredibly simple and profoundly complex. It's because beauty is not a universal truth. It's not a fixed point on a map. Beauty is a story. It's a story a culture tells itself, about itself. It's a language, and like any language, you have to learn its vocabulary and its grammar to understand what it's trying to say. For your entire life, you have been taught a specific language of beauty. It's a language written in advertisements for whitening toothpaste, in the dazzling smiles of movie stars, and in the filtered perfection of social media. In this language, the word beautiful is inextricably linked with the words white, straight, and gleaming. This language is so pervasive, so deeply ingrained, that you don't even recognize it as a language anymore. You think of it as reality. But the world of Ohaguro spoke a different dialect. In their language, the word beautiful was linked to words like civilized, mature, restrained, and enigmatic. Their story of beauty wasn't about revealing, but about concealing. It wasn't about a bright, attention-grabbing flash, but about a subtle, mysterious shadow. It was about taking a part of the body that could be seen as primal and animalistic, the teeth, and transforming it through sheer force of will and artistry into a symbol of human culture. To them, a mouth full of brilliant white teeth might have looked garish, uncontrolled, even foolishly childlike. It broke the serene, carefully constructed canvas of the face. It was an aesthetic error, a sentence spoken in the wrong grammar. Their idea of beauty was not better or worse than ours, it was simply different. It operated on a completely different set of assumptions, undamed for a completely different emotional effect. Here's a final, curious thought to leave you with. In the West, we have our own traditions of body modification that might seem just as strange to an outsider. Think of the historical practice of wearing tightly laced cords to achieve an impossibly small waist, a practice that literally rearranged internal organs. Think of high heels, which alter posture and can cause long-term foot and back problems. These are things we have done, and still do, in the name of a specific story of beauty. Are they any less strange, fundamentally, than blackening one's teeth? The academic field of cultural anthropology is built on this very idea, trying to understand why different groups of people make the choices they do. And what they consistently find is that while our solutions may differ wildly, our underlying human desires are often the same. The desire to be attractive, to signal our status, to mark important life transitions, to belong to a group. These are universal. The Heian noblewoman blackening her teeth and the modern influencer whitening theirs are, in a way, climbing the same mountain, just from opposite sides. So, the next time you see something that seems ugly or bizarre from another culture or another time, pause for a moment. Try to quiet the voice of your own cultural programming. Ask yourself, what story are they telling? What does this mean in their language? If you can do that, you'll find that the world becomes a much more interesting and much less judgmental place. The story of Ohaguro is not really about black teeth. It's about the incredible, beautiful, and sometimes baffling plasticity of human culture. It's a reminder that beauty is not something we find, but something we create, and we can create it out of anything, even a mouthful of shadows. And so, our long journey through time comes to a gentle close. The flickering lanterns of the Heian court have dimmed, the bustling streets of Edo have fallen silent, and the lost, defiant, black-toothed smile has faded into memory. The story is told. Let the details now begin to soften and blur at the edges, like watercolor bleeding into paper. The sharp scent of iron and vinegar, the rustle of silk, the distant sound of a flute. Let them all dissolve into the quiet hum of your own room. Feel the weight of the story settle, not as a collection of facts, but as a gentle, flowing dream. You can feel yourself drifting now, untethered from time and place. The boundary between the waking world and the sleeping world grows thin, as translucent as a paper screen in the moonlight. The narrative thread we followed so carefully has now unspooled, becoming a soft blanket of quiet contemplation. There are no more questions to answer, no more debates to consider. There is only the peaceful, rhythmic cadence of your own breathing. You are floating in a calm, dark, and comfortable space, much like the gentle, shadowy smile we spent so long trying to understand. Let the current of sleep carry you away, down a slow and silent river, toward a deep and restful peace. The night is yours now. The end of the article. Good night.